I count 63 people in Black Drop before the wagons roll in. 63, minus whatever the Awakened decides to take today. The bell on the mine tower rings twice. That's the signal. Not fire, not flood, just Drogo. Everyone knows the difference by now. Doors open, people stop what they're doing and walk toward the square like it's a chore because it is one. I put down the bucket I'm carrying and go too. Standing out is worse than standing in line. Drogo Fist rides in on a horse too big for these streets. Behind him, 6 men in his colors, and behind them, 2 empty carts that won't stay empty for long. He doesn't wear armor. He's never needed it here. A man who can break your spine with 2 fingers doesn't dress for a fight nobody in this village will ever start. I keep my eyes on the ground and my hands loose at my sides. Loose hands don't look like fists. Chief Toran, Drogo says, and old Toran steps forward, already bowing before his name finishes leaving Drogo's mouth. Good harvest this year? Modest, Lord, modest. Drogo repeats the word like he's tasting it and doesn't like the flavor. Load the west cart with grain. Second cart, take the goats, all of them. Nobody argues. A year ago, one man did. His name was Ren, and he worked 3 cuts down from my father's old shaft. He said the word please first, and then he said something about children going hungry, and Drogo listened to the whole thing with a small, patient smile, like a man waiting for a song to finish. Then he put 2 fingers against Ren's back and pushed, gently, the way you'd nudge open a door. Ren's spine made a sound I still hear some nights. He lived, he just doesn't walk. That's the lesson everyone in Black Drop learned for free. I learned it standing 8 feet away, close enough to hear the sound. So today the goats go into the cart, and the grain goes into the cart, and an old woman near the well cries without making noise about it, and nobody says please. I watched Drogo's men load a family's entire winter into a wooden box on wheels, and I do the math I always do. 63 people. 1 winter. Maybe 40 of them make it to spring if the mine pays out and nobody gets sick. My little brother Tem is 11. He doesn't do the math, I do it for him. My father did the same math once, underground, and lost. A support beam he'd flagged as bad 3 times went unreplaced a 4th. Black Drop doesn't waste coin fixing what hasn't collapsed yet. My mother did a different kind of math after that. How many days a fever could be ignored before it needed a healer, and how many coins a healer needed that we didn't have. She lost too. I was 12. I stopped being bad at math after that. So now I do the only kind of math that's still useful. How much can I take without anyone noticing I took it? A potato from a cart left unwatched too long. An extra half hour of work traded quietly for bread instead of coin, because coin gets counted and bread gets eaten before anyone can ask where it came from. It isn't stealing exactly. It's correcting a number that was already wrong. Behind Drogo's retinue, out of earshot of the square, 2 of his men lean against the empty cart, waiting for it to fill. 3rd village this week, one says, picking dirt from under a fingernail, Lord's getting sloppy with the counts. Half this grain's gonna rot before the estate even sees it. Not our problem what he does with it, the other says. Our problem is standing here till he's bored enough to leave. He's been more of a mood lately, since the Vera envoy passed through and didn't bow low enough for his taste. Don't say that near him tonight then. Neither of them lowers his voice much. Neither of them needs to. Nobody here would repeat it, and even if they did, who would believe a shovel over a sword? 3 days later, I make a mistake. It isn't a big one. I'm hauling water past the headman's house when the door opens and Mira steps out. Torin's daughter, 17 like me, carrying a basket she doesn't need to be carrying herself. Not with 2 awakened suitors from Drogo's household circling her father's favor. I've known her since we were both small enough to fall in the same mud puddle. I don't think about that when I look at her. I just look half a second too long, the way you look at something you know isn't yours to look at. Half a second is enough. One of Drogo's men, younger, the kind who's still hungry to prove something, sees it happen. Sees exactly where my eyes went and exactly how long they stayed there. He doesn't say anything to me. He walks straight past me into the house. I don't understand what I've done wrong until they drag me into the square an hour later. He looked, the young one says, loud enough for the whole street to hear. Looked at her like he had a right to. Drogo isn't even angry. That's what I remember most later. His face stays bored the entire time, like he's doing a chore too, the same as everyone else. He doesn't ask me to explain. There's nothing to explain that would matter. It was never really about Mira. It's about the fact that a piece of livestock forgot for half a second that it was livestock. I don't fight back. Fighting back is for people who think they'll win. I just try to protect my head and my ribs in that order, and I count the blows the way I count everything else, because counting is the only thing that still belongs to me while it's happening. I stop counting somewhere past 20. I wake up in my own bed. Tem is sitting next to me, holding a wet cloth to the worst of it, not crying, because he learned a long time ago that crying doesn't fix ribs. You have to stop looking at things, he tells me. 11 years old, and he already knows the rule better than I do. I know, I say. I don't mean it. Some part of me already knows I don't mean it, but I say it anyway, because that's what keeps both of us alive. The Harvest Festival comes 2 weeks later. It's the one night a year Black Drop is allowed to look almost like a real village. Lanterns strung between the mine posts, a fire in the square, watered-down beer that Drogo's men don't bother confiscating because it isn't worth the trip. People laugh a little louder than usual. Not because they're happier, because it's the one night they're allowed to. Drogo comes down for it every year. He likes an audience. Tonight he's already deep into a bottle by the time the fire is lit, sprawled across a chair someone dragged out just for him, his retinue loose and loud around him. I keep to the edges with Tem, close enough to see, far enough to leave fast if the night turns the way festivals sometimes turn. 2 carts of harvested wheat, gone. 1 winter's goats, gone. My ribs still healing under my shirt. I've learned to hold all of it quietly, the way you hold a hot coal you can't put down. Not comfortable, but survivable, as long as you don't grip any tighter than you have to. I watch Drogo laugh at something one of his men says, and for a moment I let myself believe the night might just pass like any other. Loud, ugly, over by morning. Somewhere behind me, one of the younger men in Drogo's retinue leans toward another and murmurs something I'm not meant to hear about the Lord being in a mood for sport tonight. I don't hear the whole exchange. I only catch the shape of it, sport, and the shape is enough to put a cold thread through my stomach. Drogo stands up, stretches, looks out over the fire at all 63 of us like a man surveying a herd he's grown bored of counting. It's been a quiet year, he says, to nobody in particular, and smiles the way he smiled before he touched Ren's spine. Let's make some noise. I grab Tem's sleeve without thinking about it, already pulling him back toward the dark at the edge of the firelight. I don't know yet what sport means tonight. I just know, the way I've always known, that whatever it is, it's going to cost someone in this square more than they can afford to pay. Sport turns out to mean this. Drogo wants to see how fast we can run. He doesn't announce it like that. He just stands up from his chair, stretches, and starts walking toward the fire with a loose, easy grin. The kind that means he's already decided how the next few minutes go and is only waiting for the rest of us to catch up. His retinue laughs before he's even said anything because they know the shape of this too. Run, he says to the crowd in general. Whoever's still standing when I get bored keeps their teeth. Nobody runs at first. Running feels like agreeing to be hunted, and some stubborn part of every person in that square doesn't want to agree to anything. Then a bolt of green light cracks past someone's shoulder, close enough to singe hair, and the square breaks apart like water hit with a stone. I've got Tem's sleeve in my fist already. I pull him toward the gap between 2 houses, away from the fire, away from the open ground where the light keeps finding people. It isn't real magic, not the kind that kills on purpose. Drogo's playing. That's the word people will use tomorrow, in low voices when they talk about what happened tonight. He was only playing. We almost make it clear. The bolt that finds Tem isn't aimed at him. I'm almost sure of that later, when I've had time to turn it over and over, looking for someone to blame more than the obvious one. It's aimed at a man 3 feet to our left, and it goes wide, and Tem's arm is simply in the wrong piece of air at the wrong second. He doesn't scream right away. There's a gap, half a breath, where his face just goes blank with confusion, like his body hasn't told his mind yet what happened. Then the smell hits. Burnt cloth, burnt skin, and he screams, and I'm on my knees next to him before I've decided to move. Both hands hovering over an arm I don't know how to touch without making it worse. The skin from his elbow to his wrist is ruined, not bleeding, cauterized, which somehow makes it worse to look at, because it means the burning is already finished doing its work. Kale. Tem's voice comes out thin, more shock than pain, though the pain will catch up to him soon enough. Kyle, I can't feel my hand. You will, I say, because it's the only thing I can think to say, and because I don't actually know if it's true. I press my palm flat against his shoulder, not the burn, just something solid to hold on to. and for a second his breathing slows enough that I think maybe we can still get out of this square without anything worse happening. I look for someone, anyone, who knows healing better than I do. Old Isa, who sets bones and stitches cuts, is on the far side of the fire, frozen in place like everyone else, watching the light bolts crack across the dark and deciding, correctly, that moving is more dangerous than standing still. Behind us, Drogo laughs at something, not at Tem. He probably hasn't even noticed. That's the part that finally breaks something loose in my chest. That my brother's arm is gone, really gone, for the rest of whatever life he has left, and the man responsible doesn't even know it happened. He's not even looking this way. He's looking at his own men, sharing the joke, already moving on to the next thing that might amuse him. I've spent 3 years learning exactly how much weight I can carry without breaking. Tonight I find the edge of it. I don't remember picking up the pickaxe. I remember having it. It's the one I use in the shallow cuts near the surface, light enough for a boy my size, sharp because a dull pick gets you killed faster than a collapse does. I cross the square with it raised over my head, and somewhere in the part of my mind that's still capable of thinking clearly, I know exactly how this ends. I know it before the first step. I do it anyway. Drogo turns around at the sound of my feet, more curious than alarmed. He watches me come the way you'd watch a dog decide to bite, with mild interest in whether it actually will. I swing. He doesn't move much. A hand comes up, almost lazy, and the pickaxe stops dead against his palm like it's hit a wall, and then the same hand flicks sideways and I'm airborne. I land somewhere near the fire, skidding through dirt and ash, and the pain doesn't arrive until I've already stopped moving, all of it at once, ribs and shoulder and the side of my face. For one long second, nobody in the square makes a sound. Then Drogo starts laughing again, except this laugh is different from the one before. This one has an edge to it that makes the hair on my arms stand up. Well, he says, flexing the hand I hit, not because it hurts him, but because he wants everyone to see that it doesn't. Look at that. It bites. He walks toward me, slow, and I understand, not guess, understand with total clarity, that the rules I've lived inside my whole life have just changed. A beating in the square is a punishment. What's coming toward me now isn't punishment. It's an example, and he intends for the whole village to remember it. I've seen Drogo make examples before. He's good at it. He knows exactly how long to draw something out so the fear outlasts the actual damage, so that a village remembers a lesson for years off the strength of one bad night. I understand, watching his face, that I've just volunteered to be that lesson. Somewhere behind him I hear Torin's voice, low, urging his men not to interfere, and I don't blame him for that either. Nobody in that square owes me anything. I never expected them to. Bring me the boy, he tells one of his men, meaning me, and I realize I'm still on the ground, and I realize if I stay on the ground, I'm not getting back up. I run. I don't choose the direction. My feet choose it toward the tree line past the last row of houses, into the dark where the lanterns don't reach. Behind me, I hear Drogo's voice, not angry, amused, which is worse, telling his men not to bother chasing hard, that the forest will do the work for them, that a scared animal always finds its own way to die. I run anyway. Branches open cuts across my arms I don't feel until much later. Roots try to take my ankles out from under me twice, 3 times. I don't look back to see if anyone's actually following. Looking back costs speed, and speed is the only thing I have left that's still mine. The forest past Black Drop isn't a forest anybody walks for pleasure. It's the kind that grows over old workings, collapsed tunnels, played out shafts, ground that's been hollowed out from underneath for 2 generations of mining before anyone thought to write down where. My father used to say the whole hillside was more air than rock by now, and that the trees only stayed standing out of habit. I never understood how much I believed that story until my feet start finding it true. Twice I hear voices behind me. Not close, not yet, but not far enough either. One of them might be laughing. I can't tell anymore if it's real or if my own head is supplying it, filling in the sound Drogo would make if he cared enough to actually watch this happen. Either way, I don't slow down to check. I find out exactly how the ground fails a person who isn't paying attention. There's no warning under my feet. No crack, no give I could have caught in time. One step the earth is there, and the next step it simply isn't, and I'm falling through black air with nothing to grab and no idea how far down the bottom is. The fall doesn't last long enough for me to think anything useful. Just long enough to understand with a strange, distant calm that I'm probably about to die exactly the way the old stories always said the forest kills people who stop being careful, quietly, without an audience, without even Drogo bothering to watch. Then the water hits me, ice cold and total, and it isn't calm anymore. It's just cold and dark, and my lungs already burning for air I can't find, sinking toward a bottom I can't see in a place with no name that anyone in Black Drop would recognize. The last clear thought I have, before the cold takes the rest of them, is Tem's arm, what it looked like, what it will look like for the rest of his life. Then there's nothing but water and dark and going down. Drowning doesn't feel the way the old stories describe it. Nobody's life passes in front of their eyes. There's just cold and pressure and a stupid, stubborn reflex to breathe that I have to fight every single second, even though breathing here means water instead of air. Then, underneath the cold, something else. A pull. Not water moving me. Something moving the water, the way a hand moves through it. My chest is already past the point where it should have given out. It doesn't. Something is holding the give out away from me, on purpose, the way you'd hold a door shut against wind. I break the surface into air that tastes like stone and old dust. Not forest, not the sky I fell out of. My body doesn't understand this yet. It just knows there's air, and it takes it in ragged, useless gulps, while the rest of me lies face down against wet rock, coughing up water I don't remember swallowing. It's dark. Not night dark. The kind of dark that's never seen a sun, ever, not once. But somewhere close by, there's a faint light, low and blue-gray, coming from nowhere I can point to. You're stubborn, a voice says. That's useful. Most drowning things stop fighting long before you did. I don't answer. I can't. My lungs are still busy deciding whether they're going to work. Take your time, the voice says, and there's something almost amused in it, though it doesn't sound young and it doesn't sound kind exactly. It sounds patient. The way a very old thing is patient with something very small. You're not going anywhere. Neither am I. It takes a long time before I can sit up, longer before I can talk. When I finally manage both, I look for a source to the voice and find nothing. Just cave wall, black water behind me, and that low light with no visible flame feeding it. Where am I? Under the hill your village calls cursed. Under the shafts your father dug and the ones before him. You fell a long way, boy. Most things that fall this far don't get to ask questions after. Who are you? A pause, longer than the others. A question with a complicated answer. The short version, I had a name once. It isn't spoken anymore, not in any temple, not by any priest. That was arranged carefully a long time ago by people who wanted to make very sure of it. You're a god. I was a god. No hesitation on that correction. Now I'm something smaller. A voice in a hole in the ground, pulling half-drowned boys out of water because it's the only thing left in my reach worth doing. I should be more afraid than I am. Some part of me knows that, but fear takes energy, and I don't have much left tonight. Tem's arm took most of what I had, and the pickaxe and the fall took the rest. What's left in me isn't fear. It's something colder and flatter, the thing that's left over after you've already lost the two things you were most afraid of losing. I need something, I say, because it's the only thing that still matters. Not for me, for my brother. I know what you need, the voice says. I heard you thinking it the whole way down. You want the man who did that to him to stop breathing. I don't correct him. There's no point pretending otherwise. Not down here, not to whatever this is. The voice, he tells me to call him Namayon, the closest my mouth can manage to whatever his real name sounds like, explains it plainly, without the kind of speeches gods are supposed to give. 1,000 years ago, he says, there was a pact. The strongest, the most desperate, or the most deserving of each generation get awakened. A bargain with a god, granting power, inhuman strength, gifts no ordinary person can match. The awakened rule everything since. Judges, lords, armies, law. An ordinary man standing next to one isn't a man at all in that arrangement. He's a resource. Every awakened is a thread, Namayon says. A living anchor between their god and this world. The gods don't just hand out power and walk away. They need the connection to stay real here, to stay present, to matter. Cut enough threads, and the god on the other end starts to come apart. Weakens. Eventually, dies. So if I kill them, you unmake the gods who made them. A flicker of something in his voice, there and gone too fast to name. Satisfaction, maybe, or old, patient hunger. That's the offer, boy. I pull you out of the dark, You put my enemies in it. Why should I trust a God who wants something from me? You shouldn't, he says immediately. No offense in it at all. Trust is for people who have better options. You don't, neither do I, currently, which is why I'm making this offer to a half-drowned miner's son instead of doing it myself. I think of Tem's arm, blank and confused before the pain caught up to it. I think of the sound Ren's spine made, 3 cuts down from where my father used to work. I think of my mother and a fever nobody could afford to treat, and 63 people in a square who all learned, the same year I did, exactly what silence buys you. What do I get, I ask, besides revenge? Power, Nemayan says. Eventually, not tonight. Understand that clearly before you agree to anything. I am not what I was. I can't hand you strength the way the living gods do for their awakened, all at once, a gift wrapped and delivered. I'm a shadow of what I used to be, sealed in this hole for longer than your whole village has existed. What I can give you now is small. What comes after has to be earned. Blood, risk, time, mostly time. How small is small? Sharper hearing. Cuts that close faster than they should. Small enough that if you go looking for a fight tomorrow expecting to win it easily, you'll die exactly as easily as you would have without me. It isn't a generous offer. I understand that even through the cold and the exhaustion. A God who admits up front that he's weak, that the bargain is slow, that most of the cost falls on me before any of the power does. That's not the kind of offer storytellers make gods give. It's the kind of offer a desperate thing makes when it's finally found leverage after a very long time without any. I don't need generous. I need someone willing to make the deal at all. I'll do it, I say. You didn't ask what happens to you, Nemayan says, and there's something almost like curiosity in it now, testing me rather than pressuring me. Most people ask that first. Would the answer change what I do next? A pause, then quieter. No, probably not. Then it doesn't matter yet. Something shifts in the dark, not visible, just felt. A kind of settling, like a held breath finally released on the other end of an old silence. Then we have an agreement, Kale of Blackdrop. I am not your friend. I am not your savior, no matter how this looked tonight. I am a tool you're about to use, exactly as much as you're about to be a tool I use. Understand that now, and we'll get along. I feel something change, faint and small, a sharpening at the edges of the dark around me. Sounds I couldn't have caught a minute ago, suddenly clear. Water dripping 3 tunnels away. My own pulse slowing back toward normal, faster than it should. It isn't strength. It isn't anything close to what I'll need to face a man who can break spines with 2 fingers. But it's a start, and starts are the only thing I have left tonight that Drogo hasn't already taken from me. It takes 6 days before Nemayan says I'm ready, and even then he doesn't sound sure of it. 6 days of sleeping in dry pockets of the cave system, of learning the North Passage well enough to move through it without light, of Nemayan testing the small gift he's given me, sharper hearing, skin that closes a shallow cut in an hour instead of a week, against things that don't matter much, catching the drip of water before it lands, hearing a rat's heartbeat from 4 feet away in total dark. Small things, nothing that would help against a man who breaks spines with 2 fingers. You understand this isn't a fair fight, Nemayan says, the night before, while I sit cleaning dirt from under my nails with the same patience I used to save for sharpening a pick. You're not going to beat him standing in front of him. Not now, maybe not for years, I know. Then you understand what you're actually about to do. I do. I've had 6 days to sit with it in the dark, longer than anyone should get to sit with a decision like this before making it. I've rehearsed it 100 different ways in my head, and every version ends the same. Drogo dead and me still alive, which is the only outcome I actually care about tonight. Whatever comes after that, I'll figure out once it's true. There's another way to think about it, Nemayan offers, unprompted, which he rarely does. You could wait, grow stronger first, come at him properly. In a year, 2 years, with something closer to an even fight. Would that make it easier for Tem? A pause. No. Then I'm not waiting. Drogo sleeps outside the manor most festival nights, drunk enough that his men just leave him under whatever tree catches him. Because nobody's ever needed to worry about someone finishing what a pickaxe couldn't start. Nobody's ever had a reason to think an awakened needs guarding from anything smaller than himself. I climb out of the North Passage 2 hours before dawn, into a sky I don't recognize from any angle I've seen it before, and start walking back toward the only home I've ever had. To kill the man I already tried and failed to kill once. I find him exactly where the village rumor said he'd be, sprawled against the base of an old oak past the manor gate, empty bottle still loose in one hand, snoring loud enough that I hear it before I see him. No guards close by. Why would there be? Nothing in Black Drop has ever been dangerous enough to guard against. I stand over him for longer than I mean to. This is the part nobody tells you about killing someone, even someone who's earned it 100 times over. The actual moment doesn't feel like justice. It doesn't feel like anything you rehearsed in your head during 6 days of waiting in the dark. It just feels like a decision you have to make with your hands, one small motion at a time, while your whole body tries to talk you out of it. I raise the pick. My hands are shaking. I make myself think of Tem's arm instead of Drogo's face because Drogo's face, slack, unconscious, almost peaceful, doesn't look like the face that laughed while my brother screamed. It just looks like a man asleep. I bring the pick down anyway. The first strike lands wrong, glances off his shoulder instead of finding anything vital, and he makes a sound, half groan, half question, starting to wake. I don't let myself think. I strike again, and this one finds his throat, and the third one is barely necessary, but I do it anyway, because some animal part of me needs to be certain, needs there to be no possible version of tonight where he opens his eyes again. Then it's done, and I'm standing over a dead awakened with a pick that isn't shaking anymore because my whole body has gone strangely, terribly still. I make it 4 steps before I'm on my knees in the grass, throwing up everything I have left in my stomach, which isn't much after 6 days underground. Nemayan doesn't say anything while it happens. I'm grateful for that, more than I could have explained if he'd asked. It's done, he says finally, once I've stopped heaving and I'm just kneeling there, breathing. I know it's done. I only mean, you should move. Now, not after you've finished feeling whatever you're feeling. He's right, and I hate that he's right, and I make myself stand anyway. I don't feel powerful walking away from that oak tree. I want to be honest about that, at least to myself, since I clearly can't be honest with anyone else about it ever again. I don't feel like the hero of anything. I feel like someone who did something that can't be undone for a reason that was good enough in the dark 6 days ago and now just feels like a fact sitting in my chest, heavy and permanent. I don't go back for Tem. That's the part that costs the most, more than the killing did. I make it as far as the tree line above our house, close enough to see the shape of the roof against the paling sky, and I stop myself there, because Nemayan was right about this too, days ago. In a way I only understand now. A boy who goes home first is a boy who gets caught first, and everyone he loves gets caught with him. I stand at that tree line longer than I should, watching for any sign of movement inside. A lamp lit, a shadow crossing the one window I can see. Nothing. It's too early. Tem's still asleep, arm wrapped in whatever cloth Issa managed, probably dreaming something that has nothing to do with any of this, and some small, selfish part of me is grateful for that. Let him have one more morning where he doesn't know yet what his brother did in the dark before dawn. I leave the only thing of value I have, a small carved fox my father made years ago before the mine took him, tucked into the gap under our door where Tem will find it and know, without needing a note that could be read by anyone else, that I made it out alive. It isn't enough. Nothing I could leave would be enough. It's what I have. Then I walk into the trees, away from Black Drop, away from every name I've ever known, and I don't look back, because looking back has never once made anything easier in my whole life. And I don't expect tonight to be the exception. By mid-morning, word has already started moving. I hear it secondhand, crouched in a ditch near a crossroads while a farmer's cart rattles past 2 men on foot discussing it like weather, dead in his own yard. Throat opened. Who'd dare? Nobody knows yet. Guild's put a bounty notice up already. Fugitive of Black Drop, they're calling him. No name. They'll have a name by week's end. Boy, that green doesn't stay hidden long. Further down the road, past a bend I can't see, a third voice joins in, older, unhurried. Won't be a boy that did it, take more than a boy to put down an awakened, drunk or not, then who? Don't know. Don't much care either. One less tax collectors, one less tax collector. Nobody in the exchange sounds particularly grieved. That's its own small, strange comfort. That whatever else Drogo was to the people who knew him only from the manor gate outward, nobody's rushing to mourn him either. I stay in the ditch until the cart passes, then longer, until my heartbeat stops trying to climb out of my chest. No name yet. That's something at least. A small window before the whole width of the guild's reach turns toward finding out exactly who I am. They'll have a description soon enough, Nemaeon says, quiet, almost gentle, which is somehow worse than if he'd said it flatly. You need to be someone else by the time they do. I don't know how to be anyone else. No, he agrees. But you're going to learn, starting now. I get up out of the ditch and I keep walking, and somewhere behind me, back in Blackdrop, a village wakes up to find the man who taxed them in blood for years finally dead. And none of them will ever know it was the quiet boy who used to haul water past the headman's house. The one who learned a long time ago that looking too long at anything was the most dangerous thing he could do. I've stopped being that boy sometime in the last 6 days. I'm not sure yet what I've become instead. I only know there's no road back to Blackdrop that doesn't end with Tem paying for what I did tonight, and that's the one price I refuse to let anyone else settle for me. Hunger has a rhythm to it once you've lived with it long enough. It isn't constant pain. It comes in waves, sharp in the morning, dull through midday, sharp again at night. And somewhere in between you learn to function around it the same way you'd work around a bad knee. I know this rhythm from Blackdrop already. It's almost a comfort, in a bitter sort of way, that exile hasn't taught me anything new about being hungry. What it has taught me is how to steal properly, which is different from stealing the way I used to. A potato here, an extra hour of labor traded quietly for bread. Now it's bread off a cooling rack while the baker's back is turned, a coat left drying on a fence overnight, coin dropped and not noticed by a drunk man too far gone to remember dropping it. I don't like any of it. I do all of it anyway, because Nemaeon was right about one thing from the very first night. Wanting to go back doesn't mean I should, and staying alive out here doesn't leave room for much dignity. I sleep in barns when I can find one unlocked, in the lee of haystacks when I can't, always moving the next morning before the farm wakes up around me. 3 towns in 2 weeks, none of them close enough to Blackdrop that anyone's heard the name of the fugitive they're supposedly hunting, though the description, young, thin, dark hair, travels alone, fits half the beggar boys in the region, which is the only reason I haven't already been dragged in by some bounty hunter eager for guild coin. One night, in a barn outside a town whose name I don't bother learning, I hear the farmer's wife talking through the wall about the Blackdrop business. A servant girl's cousin passed through with the story, how a taxman was found dead in his own yard, throat opened, no witnesses. She sounds more curious than afraid. Whoever did it, she says, saved some village a fortune in grain. I lie very still in the hay, listening to my own life discussed like weather, and understand for the first time just how far this is going to travel before it's done traveling. The training happens at night, in dreams that don't feel like dreams. Nemaeon calls it the only classroom he has left. I fall asleep exhausted, hollow with hunger, and wake somewhere else entirely. A version of the world stripped down to gray light and simple shapes, where Nemaeon can build small scenarios out of nothing and put me inside them. The first lessons aren't about magic. They're about moving without being noticed, how to set a foot down heel first instead of flat, how to time a step against ambient noise instead of into silence, how to read the small tells of another person's attention, where their eyes are pointed, which way their weight is leaning, whether their breathing has changed in a way that means they've noticed something. Again, Nemaeon says, for what feels like the 40th time, after I've failed to cross a dream version of an empty room without waking a dream version of a sleeping guard. You're thinking about your feet. Stop thinking about your feet. What am I supposed to think about? Him. Always him. Your feet already know what to do if you let them. I die in these dreams. Not really. I understand that somewhere underneath the panic each time it happens, but it doesn't feel like a lesson while it's happening. It feels like failing over and over, waking up in a cold sweat in whatever barn or ditch I've claimed for the night, heart hammering like the danger was real. Nemaeon doesn't apologize for it. Better here than out there, he says every time, and he's right, which doesn't make it easier to hear. By the 3rd week, I decide I'm ready for something real. I shouldn't have decided that alone. I know this now, with the clean, useless clarity that only comes after a mistake has already been made. But hunger and impatience make a bad combination, and I've had 3 weeks of dream failures and real hunger and no actual progress toward the only thing that matters, Tem. And everyone else Drogo's kind will keep hurting while I sit in barns learning to walk quietly. There's a miner awakened working the market town 2 days south, a tax collector, like Drogo, but smaller, younger, less feared. I watch him for 2 days from rooftops and alley mouths, building what I think is a solid plan. He takes the same route home each night, alone, past a stretch of warehouses with no witnesses. I don't tell Namayan the full plan. I tell him enough to get agreement, not enough to get argument. You're not ready, he says anyway, somehow knowing more than I told him. I can feel it in you. You've built this whole plan around one version of tonight going right. I have to start somewhere, not like this. I go anyway. The collector isn't what I expected. He's younger than Drogo, yes, but he's also faster, more alert. The kind of awakened who's survived this long precisely because he doesn't assume the way Drogo did that nothing in the dark is worth watching for. He hears me before I'm in position. Some small sound, a shifted foot, a held breath that wasn't held quite well enough, and he doesn't panic. He turns, calm, already reaching for something at his belt, and I understand in that half second that every piece of my plan has just come apart at once. What happens next isn't a fight, it's barely even a chase. He's faster than me, and the alley I picked for cover becomes a trap instead. And within moments, I'm on the ground with his boot against my throat and something crackling with heat gathering in his raised hand, and I understand with total, icy clarity that I'm about to die in a warehouse alley 2 days from anywhere anyone will ever know to look for my body. Then something in my chest tears loose. Not pain exactly, more like a string snapping under too much weight, and a burst of raw force throws the collector back 10 feet into a stack of crates before his hand finishes closing around whatever he was about to do to me. I don't move for a long moment, chest heaving, waiting to see if he gets back up. He doesn't, not right away. Stunned, maybe hurt, but not dead, and I don't stay to find out which. I run badly, favoring a leg that took the worst of his boot, and I don't stop running until the market town is an hour behind me, and my legs simply refuse to carry me any further. That cost me, Namayan says, once I've collapsed against a tree, shaking, alive only because of whatever he just did. His voice sounds thinner than usual, strained, the way a person sounds after carrying something too heavy for too long. More than I wanted to spend this early. I won't always be able to do that. Understand that clearly because next time I might not have anything left to give. I understand. Do you? There's an edge in it now, real anger, the first I've heard from him. You went against a plan you knew was incomplete because you're impatient, and it nearly ended everything. Yours and mine both. I've waited a very long time for someone like you, Kale. I don't intend to lose you to a mistake I warned you about in advance. I don't have an answer for that. He's right, and being right doesn't need my agreement to still be true. I'm sorry, I say finally, and mean it, though I know it doesn't cost him anything to hear it. Sorry doesn't refill what I just spent, he says, quieter now, some of the anger already burning down into something more tired. Next time we plan together. All the way through. No pieces left out because you think I'll argue with them. Agreed. I lie there against the tree a long time after that, staring up at branches I can't see clearly in the dark, feeling the leg throb where the boot landed, and I think about how close tonight came to being the last night I ever had. Not from Drogo, not from the guild. From my own impatience, wearing the shape of a plan. It's a lesson I won't need to be taught twice. Namayan changes the training after the alley. No more shortcuts, no more rushing toward the next fight before I've earned the right to survive it. Weeks of it, longer than I want, structured the way you'd build a wall, one stone at a time, check twice before the next one goes on top. Days belong to my hands. I trade 3 weeks of labor at a smithy on the edge of a river town. The smith doesn't ask questions about a boy who works hard and sleeps in his shed and never mentions where he's from, which is exactly the kind of arrangement I've learned to look for. And in exchange, I learn enough about a blade to pick one that fits my hand instead of just any blade that's cheap. A contrabandist working the river dock sells me a short sword, more scar than steel, the edge notched twice from a life I don't ask about. It costs most of what I've saved. I don't regret it once. Nights belong to Namayan. Not dream deaths anymore. Not only now it's footwork against a shape that mimics real weight, real reach, real mistakes I'd actually make against a real person. He builds the dream opponent slower than a proper awakened would move, then faster week over week, until the gap between dream slow and dream fast is close enough to what a person my size might actually survive. You're still thinking with your sword arm first, he tells me, somewhere in the 4th week, after I've died for the 9th time that night. A blade is the last thing that should move. Everything before it is the actual fight. Feels like the sword should matter more than that. It matters exactly as much as the plan that puts it where it needs to be. No plan, and the sharpest blade in the world just makes you dead slightly faster. I don't love the lesson. I understand it anyway. The way you understand a bruise is going to hurt again before you've even touched it. There are nights I nearly give up on the patience of it. 3 weeks feels like nothing measured against the years Drogo's kind have had to build their world, and every night I don't spend hunting is a night I imagine Tem somewhere I can't picture clearly. Growing up in a village that's lost one collector only to gain whatever comes to replace him, Nemeon doesn't let me linger there long. Grief for what you can't fix yet is just another kind of impatience, he tells me once, not unkindly. Put it down until it's useful. I don't know how to put it down. I learn instead how to carry it quietly, the same way I've always carried everything else. The target Nemeon picks, once he finally agrees I'm ready, isn't picked for ease. It's picked for honesty. A mid-rank awakened named Corvin, known locally for collecting debts with more force than the debts usually warrant, but known also for fighting his own fights face to face, rather than sending men to do it for him. Nemeon wants my first real test to be a real test, not another ambush in the dark. If you win this one clean, he says, you'll know something you don't know yet. Not that you're strong, that you can be strategic and still stand your ground when the plan runs out. I find Corvin on a job, collecting from a merchant who's fallen behind, in a yard behind the man's warehouse. No crowd. No witnesses beyond a few frightened workers who scatter the moment I step into view. Another debt I don't remember owing, Corvin says, amused, sizing me up the way you'd size up a strayed dog that wandered somewhere it shouldn't. You're small for this line of work, boy. I'm not here about a debt. Something shifts behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, of a rumor he's half heard from somewhere. You're the one from the south, the one who put Ren Ash through a stack of crates. Word travels. Word travels slow when it's about a dead man walking, he says, and draws. It isn't clean. Nothing about it is clean. He's fast, faster than the collector was, and stronger, and for the first several exchanges I do nothing but survive, every block costing more than it should. Every dodge a half-second slower than I need it to be. He opens a cut above my eye in the second minute that blurs half my vision red. He catches my ribs with the flat of a strike that drops me to one knee, and I understand, on that knee gasping, that this is exactly the moment Nemeon built 100 dream deaths to prepare me for. The moment where the honest answer is that I'm losing, and the only choice left is whether I stay down or don't. I don't stay down. It isn't a burst of hidden power that gets me back up. It's just the plan, finally working the way plans are supposed to. I've been herding him, without either of us quite naming it, toward a stack of loose crates near the warehouse wall. The same kind of unstable footing that put the collector down weeks ago, except this time it isn't an accident. This time I put him there on purpose, and when he finally overextends chasing a strike, I let land shallow on my forearm. I'm already moving into the space he's left open. The blade goes in under his ribs, and it isn't clean or heroic. It's ugly and close, and both of us end up on the ground, him not moving, me barely able to stand. Blood running freely from the cut over my eye into my mouth, tasting like copper and something that might be relief. I stay upright by sheer stubbornness, one hand braced against the warehouse wall, breathing in ragged pulls. And I feel something settle into place inside my chest that isn't quite like the gifts before it. Sharper, more deliberate, like a door opening onto a room I didn't know was there. Step beyond sight, Nemeon says. Quiet, almost reverent in a way I haven't heard from him before. A heartbeat where you fall out of a person's notice entirely. Small, but real. You earn this one, Kale. Properly. I don't answer right away. I'm too busy standing, which right now feels like the hardest and most honest thing I've ever done. Word moves faster than I expect after that. I hear my own story secondhand within the week, twisted the way stories always twist in other people's mouths. A masked killer who walks through awakened like they're nothing, some say. Others swear it's a spirit, not a man at all, since no ordinary person could put down two awakened and vanish clean both times. Common folk, too afraid to say it outright in a tavern where anyone might repeat it to the wrong ears, start calling the rumor something simpler in whispers, the nameless. Not because they don't believe a person did it, because they don't believe an ordinary person could. I let them believe whatever keeps the description vague. It's easier to be a rumor than a wanted boy with a face. Not everyone treats the rumor as good news, though. Word also reaches a bounty office 3 towns over, where a man named Irvin Hound takes the job of finding out exactly how ordinary the nameless really is. I don't meet him yet. I only hear his name for the first time from a nervous innkeeper, warning a table of travelers to mind their tongues because the hounds already asked questions in this town twice this month, and the hound doesn't stop asking once he's caught a scent. I file the name away, the same careful way I file away everything else that might matter later, and keep moving. Later, in a different town, I catch a glimpse of him without knowing it yet. A broad-shouldered man in gilled gray, standing too still at the edge of a market crowd. Eyes moving over faces the way a hunter's eyes move over undergrowth, looking for the wrong kind of stillness rather than the wrong kind of motion. I don't linger to find out if he's who the innkeeper meant. Something about the way he stands tells me not to test it yet. That night, away from any town, I let myself stop for the first time in weeks. Not to plan, not to train, just to sit by a small fire and feel the cut above my eye starting to close faster than it should, and let myself think for exactly as long as it takes the fire to burn low. About something other than the next fight. I think about Tammuz, not the burn, for once. Just him, small and stubborn, telling me to stop looking at things. I wonder if he's still saying it to himself, some habit he can't break even with me gone. I hope quietly, uselessly, that wherever he is tonight, nobody's making him learn any new lessons about what looking costs. It isn't much of a rest. It's the first one I've let myself take since the water closed over my head weeks ago, and for tonight at least, it's enough. The next one is a magistrate named Oren Vale, 3 towns north, and awakened who's built a reputation on selling verdicts to whoever pays more. Nemeon finds him through whispered court gossip and confirms the rest himself, somehow in ways I've stopped asking about. I don't need convincing this time. A man who sells justice for coin doesn't need much of a case built against him. The fight is shorter than the one with Corvin. Not easier, shorter, because I've learned something in the weeks since the warehouse yard, and I use it without needing to think it through step by step anymore. Read the ground before the fight starts, not during it. Vale falls into a trap I've already built into the terrain before he said a single word to me, and it's over almost before it properly begins. Afterward, kneeling by his body, I feel the same tearing sensation from the alley, smaller this time, more controlled, and something new settles into my chest alongside Step Beyond Sight. A faint hum, like blood moving slightly faster than it should, a wound on my forearm from the fight already closing visibly while I watch. Regeneration, Nemeon says. Small still, don't mistake it for invincible. I don't. I've learned that lesson already, in an alley 2 months ago, hard enough that I don't need it repeated. Vale's manservant finds the body before I'm even a mile clear of the town, and by nightfall the story's already grown a shape of its own. A masked avenger, some say. Delivering the justice Vale sold to the highest bidder for years, I don't correct anyone who tells it that way in front of me. Let the story do what stories do. It's easier to hide behind a shape people have already decided to believe in than to hide behind nothing at all. The one after Vale is worse, and not because the fight is harder. His name is Dessen, a miner awakened running protection rackets in a river town, and he isn't cruel the way Drogo was cruel, not exactly. He's tired mostly. A man who took a bad deal from his god decades ago, and has spent every year since squeezing whatever comfort he can out of people too weak to refuse him. He fights back hard when I corner him, and for one long moment near the end, exhausted, bleeding, he says something that isn't a threat. "You think you're different from me," he says, between ragged breaths, blood running from a cut along his jaw. "You're not. You just haven't had 30 years yet to get tired of being the good one. I kill him anyway. I have to." But the words follow me out of that river town in a way none of the others have, sitting in my chest like a stone I can't quite swallow or spit back out. A third gift arrives with him, a flicker, barely there, an echo of Dessen's own gift passing through me for less than a second before it fades. The ghost of what it felt like to be tired for 30 years, to have stopped believing your own excuses a long time before you stopped using them. It isn't power in any useful sense. Nemeon calls it a side effect, an accident of how the anchor severing actually works. Something of the dying awakened bleeds through briefly before the connection cuts clean. I don't sleep well that night. Not because I'm afraid of Dessen's ghost, because some small, quiet part of me understood exactly what he meant, and that understanding scares me more than any fight has. 3 more names follow over the next weeks. A slaver working the Eastern Road, a bounty hunter who'd made a habit of losing runaway debtors permanently instead of returning them, A petty lordling who liked hunting peasants for sport on his private land. An ugly, smaller echo of Drogo that makes the kill feel almost personal in a way the others didn't. The slaver goes down hardest of the three. A fortified compound, guards who aren't awakened but are numerous enough to matter, and I spend 3 full days just watching before I move. Mapping patrol routes and gate timings the way Namayan taught me, patient in a way the old, impatient version of me 2 months ago wouldn't have managed. When I finally go in, it isn't a fight so much as a series of small, quiet removals, one obstacle at a time, until the slaver himself is the only piece left on the board. He begs, at the end, in a way none of the others did. I don't let that change anything. I think about the chains I found in the compound's lower rooms, and I don't let it change anything at all. Each one leaves something behind, strength that settles deeper into my limbs, faster now, a body that recovers from a full day's fighting overnight instead of over a week. My reflexes sharpen past anything a normal person's ever should. Namayan tracks the changes carefully, cautious in a way that feels less like restraint now and more like genuine concern. "You're growing faster than your body wants to," he tells me one night, after I wake from a dream training session with a headache that doesn't fade for hours. The gifts aren't free just because the anchor severing does the work for you. Your body still has to hold what it's given. Push too hard, too fast, and it starts costing you in ways that don't show up as scars. What kind of ways? Ask me again if it happens. I'd rather not put the idea in your head before your body's actually earned the problem. It isn't reassuring. I let it go anyway, because there's nothing else useful to do with an answer like that. The part that frightens me most isn't the pain, and it isn't the growing strength either. It's the ease. I remember with total clarity how the first kill felt. The shaking hands, the 4 steps before I was on my knees vomiting into the grass, the sense that something in me had broken permanently and would never sit right again. I don't feel that anymore. The 5th kill, the 6th, they've started to feel less like something I'm forced to survive and more like something I'm simply doing, competent and clean. The way I used to swing a pickaxe without thinking about each individual strike. One night, walking away from a job that went almost too smoothly, I catch myself feeling something that isn't guilt and isn't triumph either. It's satisfaction, small, quiet, and it terrifies me more than any of the fights themselves ever have. "Nemion," I say, into the dark, once I've stopped walking long enough to admit it out loud. I think I liked that one. Not the killing, the being good at it. A long pause before he answers. That's not unusual. Skill feels like satisfaction, whatever the skill happens to be used for. That's not an answer to what I'm actually asking. No, he admits, it isn't. I sit with that non-answer for a long time, alone, feeling the new strength in my hands, the healed scars where wounds used to linger for weeks. And I think about a man who broke a miner's spine with 2 fingers while smiling. I think about how easy it must have been for him once, the first time. How maybe he felt exactly what I'm feeling now before it hardened into something he never questioned again. I make myself a promise that night, quiet, private, not spoken to Nemion or to anyone else. Whatever I become by the end of this, I won't let it become easy. The day it stops costing me something is the day I need to stop. I don't know yet how hard that promise will be to keep. I only know I need to make it now, while some part of me can still tell the difference. "Her name is Alina Ashvale," Namayan says. "Sworn to Vera, her thread is worth more than the last 6 you've cut combined. Vera, goddess of light. Of duty, if you want the temple version of it." There's something careful in how he says it, a caution I haven't heard from him about a target before. Her awakened tend to matter more than most, fewer of them held to a stricter oath. Cut this one and the ripple reaches farther than anything you've done so far. I don't ask why that matters to him specifically, not yet. I've learned that some questions get honest answers and some get careful ones, and I've learned to tell the difference by how long the pause is before he speaks. This pause is long. Where do I find her? 3 days east, a village called Thornfield. She's been there a week already, according to what I've heard through channels you don't need to know about. Doing what? Being exactly what her oath says she should be, he says, and something in his tone makes it sound less like information and more like a warning, though I don't understand it yet. I understand it within an hour of watching her. Thornfield sits on the edge of contested land, close enough to a stretch of forest that raiders, small-time awakened, running loose bands of thugs, The kind who prey on villages too poor and too far from any guild office to matter have hit it twice already this season. Alina isn't here on guild business. There's no bounty posted, no lord paying her wage. She's just here, sleeping in a hayloft the village offered out of gratitude, spending her days setting bones and stitching wounds from the last raid for free. Her nights on watch at the tree line in case there's a third. I watch her work on a farmer's daughter's broken arm. Careful, patient, talking the girl through the pain in a low, steady voice that has nothing performative in it. Nobody around to perform for except a scared child and a mother too exhausted to properly thank her. She isn't young the way I expected and awakened rewarded early to be. There's a tiredness in her that looks earned, the kind that comes from choosing the hard road over and over instead of stumbling into it once. She is, in every visible way, the opposite of everything I've learned and awakened is. I sit in the tree line for 2 full days, telling myself I'm gathering information, building a plan the way Nemayan taught me to. What I'm actually doing is watching a woman with real power spend it on people who have nothing to offer her in return, and feeling something crack quietly in the foundation I've built my entire war on. You're stalling, Nemayan says, on the second night. I'm being thorough. You're stalling. I don't argue with him because he's right, and there's no version of lying to him that would survive more than a sentence. The raiders come back on the third night, earlier than the village expected, more of them than the last time. I'm still deciding what I'm doing here, still telling myself I haven't decided anything, when the first scream reaches me from the village edge, and my body moves before the rest of me finishes arguing about it. Alina's already in the fight by the time I arrive, fast and precise, a blade of pale light drawn from nothing, cutting through the raiders' numbers with an economy of motion that tells me everything about how many fights like this she's already survived. She's good. She's also outnumbered, 6 against 1, with villagers scattering in every direction and at least 2 raiders peeling off to chase easier, unarmed targets instead of her. I don't think about it as a decision. I'm already moving toward the 2 who broke off. Staying low, staying quiet, and step beyond sight does exactly what Nemayan promised it would. A heartbeat where neither of them registers me at all, long enough to close the distance and put both of them down before either understands what's happening. I don't announce myself. I stay in the shadows at the tree line's edge, and I keep the rest of the raiders' attention split between Alina and whatever unseen thing is picking off their flanks, until the numbers that felt overwhelming a few minutes ago don't anymore. Alina finishes the last one standing, breathing hard, scanning the dark for whoever's been helping her. I'm already gone by the time her eyes find where I was. I don't leave Thornfield the next morning. I tell myself it's to make sure the raiders don't come back a third time. That's true, but it isn't the whole truth, and some part of me already knows it. Alina finds me on the second day, not by hunting, just by walking the tree line on her own patrol and running into a stranger doing the same thing for reasons she doesn't understand yet. You're the one from the fight, she says, not a question. I could deny it. I don't. I didn't need saving, she says, though there's no real edge in it, more curiosity than accusation. I know. I wasn't trying to save you. I was trying to even the numbers. That gets something close to a smile out of her, small and tired. Fair enough, we don't become friends in an afternoon. It isn't that simple, and neither of us pretends it is. But over the next several days, with the village quiet and no immediate threat pressing, we end up walking the same patrols, sharing the same fire some nights, careful and guarded with each other in the particular way of 2 people who both have reasons not to explain themselves fully. She asks about my scars once, nodding at the notched sword instead of my face, careful not to push where I clearly don't want pushed. I tell her half a truth, that I've had a rough few years, that I don't like talking about the specifics, and she accepts that without prying further, which somehow makes me feel worse than if she'd demanded the whole story. Kindness I haven't earned sits heavier than suspicion ever did. She talks about her oath, plainly, without the self-importance I expected from anyone awakened. Vera doesn't ask for conquest, she says, one night, turning a piece of kindling over in her hands instead of the fire. She asks for the opposite. Every village like this one is a debt I owe, whether she ever collects on it directly or not. Does it ever feel like too much? Owing something you can't ever pay off. Every day, she says it simply, without self-pity. I've made my peace with that. What's the alternative? Stop trying because the debt's too large to clear? I don't have an answer for that. I sit with the fire instead, thinking about Dessen's ghost-tired voice still living somewhere in the back of my chest. thinking about a promise I made to myself weeks ago about not letting this become easy, and I understand, with a kind of quiet horror, that I came here to end this woman's life. Why did I have to kill her too? I asked Namayan that night, once Alina's asleep and I'm alone with the fire burned down to coals. Because her thread matters. I told you that already. That's not an answer. That's just repeating the assignment. A pause, longer than usual. You're asking me to justify something I've never needed to justify to any of my instruments before. Maybe that's the problem, Kale. His voice sharpens, not quite anger, something closer to warning. We had a bargain. I didn't ask you to fall in love with every thread I point you toward. I asked you to cut them. I'm not asking you to change the bargain. I'm asking you to explain it. There's a difference. He doesn't answer that. Not with words, not with the kind of careful evasion he usually manages when a question gets too close to something he doesn't want examined. He just goes quiet, and the quiet stretches long enough that I understand, without him saying anything at all, that this is the first thing he's ever refused to give me. I sit with that refusal a long time, watching the coals die down to nothing, and for the first time since the water closed over my head, I let myself wonder, quietly, carefully, in a place even Nemeon might not be able to reach, whether everything he's told me about this bargain has been the whole truth, or just the parts of it that kept me moving in the direction he needed. I don't ask him again that night, but I don't stop wondering either. The notice goes up in every guild office within a month, the nameless, officially recognized as a first-tier threat, bounty raised high enough that even lords start paying attention instead of leaving it to hired hunters. I hear it read aloud in a market square by a guild crier, flat and official, and I stand in the crowd listening to a description of myself that's finally starting to sound less like rumor and more like a real closing net. They're not sending one hunter anymore, Namayan says that night. They're sending a coordinated effort. Multiple awakened, working together, sharing information. That changes things. How much? Enough that Thornfield isn't safe for you to keep returning to. I already knew that. I keep returning anyway because some things matter more than safety, and because leaving Alina without a word feels like a smaller betrayal than the one I'm already planning not to commit. I meet Irvin Hound properly for the first time on a road 2 days from Thornfield, and I understand within the first 10 seconds why his name travels ahead of him the way it does. He isn't fast in the way Corvan was fast, or brutal in the way Drogo was brutal. He's patient, methodical, the kind of hunter who's already 3 moves ahead before the prey knows it's being tracked. I don't see the trap until I'm standing inside it, a narrow stretch of road between 2 rock faces, exits sealed by men positioned before I ever arrived, and Irvin himself standing calm in the center of it, sword still sheathed, like a man who's already won and is simply waiting for the other person to notice. "You're smaller than the stories," he says, almost conversational. "Good. Smaller means you made mistakes to get this far. Mistakes mean patterns. Patterns mean I found you. You could have sent men instead of coming yourself. I don't trust other men's patience with something this important." His eyes move over me once, cataloging, the way a craftsman studies a tool before deciding whether it's worth keeping. 6 awakened dead in under 3 months. 2 of them careful men, hard to reach. Whatever taught you, it taught you well. I'd almost call it a waste, ending this here. Then don't. Duty rarely asks what I'd prefer. He finally draws, unhurried. Let's see how much of the rumor is true. It goes badly, and it goes badly fast. Irvin fights nothing like the awakened I've killed so far, no wasted motion, no anger to exploit, no overextension I can bait him into the way I baited Corvin into a stack of crates. He reads my footwork within the first exchange and starts countering moves I haven't made yet, and within minutes I'm bleeding from 3 places and understanding. With the same cold clarity from the alley months ago, that I've finally met something step beyond sight and regeneration, and every gift I've earned isn't enough to overcome on its own. Kale. Namayan's voice sharp in my head, no time wasted on anything but the immediate problem. I can buy you an opening. 1. It'll cost more than the alley did. Take it and run. Do not try to finish this fight. I don't argue. I don't have the breath to. The opening comes as a burst of force that throws Irvin back 3 steps. Not enough to hurt him seriously, just enough to buy the half-second I need to break for the rock face's narrower gap. Scrambling up loose stone while men shout below me, arrows and worse cracking off rock inches from my hands. I don't make it clean. A blade catches my side on the way over the ridge, shallow but ugly. And I'm running on instinct, and Nemaeon's borrowed strength through unfamiliar terrain with blood soaking through my shirt and no plan beyond simply not stopping. I don't remember the moment I collapse. I remember cold ground and voices too far away to place, and then nothing. I wake in a low-ceilinged room I don't recognize, wound cleaned and bound properly, and Alina sitting across from me with an expression I can't immediately read. "You've been unconscious for a day," she says. "I found you half a mile from where the fighting happened. Followed the blood." I don't say anything. There isn't anything useful to say yet, not until I understand how much she already knows. "I know who you are," she says, before I can ask. "Not from tonight. I've suspected for a while, since the raid, if I'm honest with myself. Nobody moves like that without training I've only ever seen in one place, and there's only one story going around about someone who moves like that. Alina, I'm not finished." Her voice stays level, but there's something underneath it, carefully controlled. "I know you're the Nameless. I know the bounty on your head could set me up for the rest of my life if I turned you in. And I know Irvin Hound is combing every road within 20 miles right now, which means every hour I spend not reporting this is an hour I'm choosing, deliberately, to become part of whatever you're doing. I brace for what comes next, certain I already know the shape of it. So tell me," she says instead. "All of it, not the parts that make you look good. All of it, and then I'll decide," I tell her. "Not everything. I hold back the parts about Nemaeon's true nature, mostly because I don't fully understand them myself yet, but I tell her about Blackdrop, about Drogo, about Tem's arm and the sound Ren's spine made, and 63 people who learned exactly what silence costs. I tell her about the pact, plainly, the bargain that trades awakened lives for power I never asked to need. I tell her about the collector in the alley, about Vale and Dessen and the slaver's compound, about the promise I made myself not to let it become easy, and about how hard that promise has already gotten to keep. She listens without interrupting, her face giving away less than I expect, and when I finally run out of things to say, the silence stretches long enough that I start preparing myself for the worst version of what comes next. I watch her weigh it. I can see the shape of the argument happening behind her eyes, duty on one side, whatever she's decided I actually am on the other. It isn't a quick calculation, I don't rush her through it. Some decisions deserve the full weight of their difficulty, and I'd rather she reach the wrong conclusion honestly than the right one because I pushed. "You've killed Vera's enemies too," she says finally. Not the accusation I expected, something closer to careful observation. Corvin, Vale, the Ash Collector. Every one of them was known to my order. Every one of them was already under investigation before you got to them. That's not why I killed them, I know. But it's true, regardless of your reasons. She's quiet a moment longer. "I don't agree with what you're doing, Kale. Killing isn't justice, not really, even when the people dying deserve worse than what you've given them. But I've spent this last week watching what's actually in front of me instead of what a bounty notice says should be there, and what's in front of me isn't a monster. It's a boy who's in over his head and doesn't know how to stop. So what happens now?" "Now," she says, standing, checking the door out of old habit rather than real fear, "I don't turn you in. I help you get somewhere safer than this room, because Irvin's men are still searching, and because, for reasons I'm still working out how to explain to myself, I find I'd rather have you alive and complicated than dead and simple. I don't know how to answer that. I don't try, I just let myself, for the first time in longer than I can remember, feel something other than exhausted or afraid. It doesn't last long. Nothing good has lasted long since the night the bell rang twice on the mine tower, and some tired, cynical part of me has stopped expecting it to. But for the space of that one quiet breath, sitting in a stranger's borrowed room with my sides still aching and my future entirely uncertain, it's enough just to have been seen clearly by someone and not immediately condemned for it. It doesn't last. Somewhere outside, close enough to hear through the walls, a dog starts barking at something in the dark, and both of us go still at the same moment, the same old instinct rising in both our chests. "They're close," Alina says, quiet, already reaching for her blade. "How close?" "Close enough that we're not staying to find out." We don't get far before the dog stops barking and starts screaming, cut off mid-sound in a way that means something found it first. Alina has us moving before I've fully processed the noise, out a back window and into a narrow alley behind the house, away from the torchlight already gathering at the front. We don't outrun them, not really. What we do is worse and better at once. We find a chapel on the edge of the settlement, half ruined, one of the old minor shrines nobody's bothered maintaining in decades. And we go to ground inside it while Irvin's men fan out through the streets looking for two people who've already stopped moving. It's inside that chapel, surrounded by faded murals of gods nobody prays to anymore, that I finally demand an answer I should have demanded months ago. Tell me the truth, I say, into the dark, quiet enough that only Nemayan could hear it, even if the walls weren't as thick as they are. All of it. Why you were sealed. What actually happens if I finish this? Now isn't the time. It's exactly the time. I nearly died tonight for your war, and Alina's risking everything she has for a stranger she's known a week, and I am done making decisions blind. Tell me, or I stop. Right here, right now. Whatever that costs either of us. The silence that follows is different from every silence before it. Longer, heavier. When Nemayan finally speaks, something in his voice has changed. Less patient teacher, more something older and more tired than I've heard from him yet. Sit down, he says. This will take longer to explain than you'll want it to. I don't sit. Alina does, slowly, her back against cold stone, sword still loose in her hand in case the night isn't done with us yet. I stay standing because sitting feels like agreeing to be calm about whatever comes next, and I'm not ready to make that agreement. Start with why you were sealed, I say. The real reason, not the shape of it you gave me at the bottom of that hole. Alina finds the answer before Nemayan finishes giving it to me. Not from him, but from an old, dust-covered plaque bolted to the chapel's inner wall. One of the few surfaces still intact enough to read. She traces the faded lettering with 2 fingers, reading it half aloud, half to herself, and her face changes as she does. This is a shrine to the Sundering, she says. I know this story. Every temple of Vera teaches it, though we're not told the god's actual name. It's forbidden, deliberately, so the story doesn't accidentally become a summoning. A god who ruled through his awakened like they were property instead of servants, who erased entire peoples who refused to kneel. The old pantheon didn't banish him for jealousy, like the folk versions say. They fought a war to stop him, a real one. Thousands died on both sides before he was finally sealed. That's not, I start and stop, because some part of me already knows exactly where this is going, and some part of me has known for longer than I've been willing to admit. Ask him, Alina says, quiet, watching me rather than the plaque now. Ask him if that's him. I do. The silence that follows is long enough to be its own answer. When Nemayan finally speaks, there's no more evasion in it. No more careful redirection. Just something close to weary honesty. The sound of a very old thing finally too tired to keep lying. Yes, he says, that's me. He doesn't soften it. I'll give him that much later when I have the distance to be fair about any of this. He lays it out plainly, the way you'd finally set down something you've been carrying too long to pretend was light. I did rule through them. Not as partners, as instruments. The way you'd wield a tool, discarded and replaced when they broke or displeased me. I told myself then that it was necessary, that the world needed a firm hand, and firm hands require obedient fingers. I believed that for longer than I'd like to admit. A pause. The peoples who refused to kneel, I didn't negotiate with them. I erased them, not metaphor. Erased. Vera's predecessors led the alliance that finally stopped me, at a cost neither side ever fully recovered from. I wasn't banished out of petty jealousy, whatever story survived in whispers after. I was stopped because I earned being stopped, and the seal that's held me since was built by people who understood exactly what they were containing. And the bargain you offered me, the threads, the anchors, my voice comes out steadier than I feel. What's the real goal, Nemayan? Not the version you told a drowning boy who needed a reason to keep breathing. Another long pause. Severing enough of Vera's anchors doesn't just weaken her. It weakens the structure of the seal itself. Her power is one of the pillars holding it. Has been since the war that built it. Enough threads cut and the seal doesn't just loosen. It breaks. You want it out. I say it flatly, understanding arriving all at once, cold and total. This was never about revenge. It was never about justice for people like me. I was never an instrument of anything except your escape. That's not entirely, don't. The word comes out harder than I intend, echoing slightly off the chapel's broken stone. Don't soften it now, after everything. You told me, that first night, that you weren't my friend, that we were tools for each other. I respected that, at least. The honesty of it. This isn't that. This is you using a scared, grieving boy as a key to his own cage and letting me believe I was choosing something noble the whole time. Alina hasn't said anything through most of this, watching me with an expression I can't fully read. Not fear, not yet, though I understand it would be reasonable if it were. When Namayan finally goes quiet, she's the one who breaks the silence. He's not wrong to be angry, she says, to the dark, to whatever's listening. But I need to understand what happens next. If Kale stops now, if he never cuts another thread, what happens to the seal as it stands? It holds, Namayan says, subdued now, something in his voice I haven't heard before. Not quite defeat, but close to it. Weakened by what's already been cut, but it holds. I'd need considerably more than what's already been taken to break it entirely, and if he keeps going. Eventually, yes, it breaks. I get free. And then what? I ask, quiet now too, all the anger burned down into something colder and more focused. What happens to the world when a god who erased whole peoples for refusing to kneel gets loose again? He doesn't answer that one. He doesn't need to. We both already know. I sit in the dark of that ruined chapel for a long time, Alina close beside me, saying nothing, letting me arrive at the understanding on my own time instead of pushing me toward it. I think about Tem's arm, about 63 people who learned what silence buys. About every awakened I've killed since, each one a small, real evil in their own right. And every one of them, I understand now, also a piece of a much larger key I was building without ever being told what door it opened. I am not an instrument of justice. I am the last piece of a cage coming apart, and I never noticed because the God inside it was patient enough and careful enough to make sure I never had a reason to look. Alina doesn't say anything for a long while after that, letting the quiet do what words can't. When she finally speaks, her voice is low, careful, the voice of someone choosing each word with real weight behind it. You didn't know, she says. That matters, Kale. Not enough to undo what's already been cut, I won't pretend it does, but it matters for what you do from here. A person who finds out they've been used and keeps walking the same path anyway is a very different thing from a person who stops. Does it matter to Vera? To the people whose awakened I've already killed? Probably not to them, she admits. But it matters to what happens next. And what happens next is the only part of this you still get to choose. I sit with that a long time, the murals of forgotten gods watching from the walls, none of them offering any answer better than the one she's already given me. I'm done, I say, once the silence in that ruined chapel has stretched long enough to become its own kind of answer. No more threads. No more names. Whatever you built me for, I'm not finishing it. Namayan doesn't argue right away. That's what frightens me. Not anger, not the sharp warning tone from the alley months ago, but a stillness that feels like something gathering rather than something giving up. You don't understand what that means, he says finally. The bargain isn't a favor I can simply stop granting because you've changed your mind. It's woven into you now. Every gift, every thread already cut, all of it runs through a connection that doesn't just switch off because you've decided you don't like where it leads. Then unmake it. I can't, not without unmaking a great deal of what keeps you alive along with it. A pause, and something colder underneath the words now. And I won't, regardless. I've waited 1,000 years for this door, Kale. I'm not letting a boy's crisis of conscience close it after I've come this close. The air in the chapel changes before I understand why. A pressure building behind my ribs, the same tearing sensation I've felt every time he spent power on my behalf. Except this time, it isn't being offered, it's being taken. He's trying to force the rest of the connection, Alina says, already on her feet, blade drawn, watching me with an urgency that tells me whatever's happening on my face isn't subtle. Kale, fight it. I don't know how to fight something happening inside my own chest. There's no enemy to strike, no footwork Namayan ever taught me built for a battle against the very thing that taught it. What I have instead is everything else, every lesson about patience, about reading a situation instead of panicking through it, and I use it now the only way I can. I stop trying to push Namayan out by force, and I start trying to understand exactly what he's actually doing. The bargain runs on threads. He said so himself, the very first night. If the connection between us is built the same way the connection between a god and an awakened is built, then it isn't an unbreakable wall. It's a thread too, thinner than the others, but a thread all the same, and threads can be cut or counterbalanced if you have something else to weigh against them. Alina. My voice comes out strained, barely holding together. You said Vera doesn't demand conquest. What does she demand? Devotion given freely, never forced. Understanding dawns across her face almost as fast as I finish the question. You want me to offer part of my connection to her, as a counterweight. Would that even work? I don't know, she admits. Nobody's ever tried it against something like this, but I trust the principle more than I trust doing nothing. It's your choice to make, not mine. Whatever this costs you, I already told you, she says, already moving, already reaching for something inside herself I can't see. I'd rather have you alive and complicated than dead and simple. That hasn't changed just because the stakes got worse. What she does next isn't a spell, not the way I understood magic before tonight. It's closer to an offering. She kneels, blade set aside, and speaks something low and steady in words I don't fully understand, opening some part of her own bond with Vera and pushing it outward, toward me, not as a weapon, but as a counterbalance, a thread of connection built on trust instead of fear or obligation. I feel it arrive like warmth against the cold pressure of Namayan's pull. Not stronger exactly, but different in kind, in a way that seems to matter more than raw strength does. The tearing sensation in my chest falters, uncertain, like a hand losing its grip on something it assumed was fixed in place. No, Namayan says, and for the first time since the bottom of that drowning pool, I hear something like fear in his voice. This isn't part of the bargain. This isn't... You don't get to decide what's part of it anymore, I say, and push back, finally, with everything I have. Not strength, not the sword skill he spent months building in me, but the plain, stubborn refusal that's carried me since the night I first raised a pickaxe over a sleeping man I had no business fighting. You lied to me from the bottom of that hole. You don't get my obedience just because you're louder than I am. The pressure breaks all at once, snapping back like an overstretched cord released, and I go down hard onto the chapel's broken stone floor, gasping. Every part of me feeling wrung out and raw in a way even the alley months ago didn't manage. The chapel door bursts open before I've fully caught my breath, and for one terrible second, I think Irvin's men have finally found us. It's Irvin himself who steps through. Alone, sword drawn but not raised, his eyes moving over the scene with the same careful, cataloging attention I remember from the road. He takes in Alina still kneeling, drained pale from whatever she just gave away. He takes in me, collapsed against stone, barely upright. He takes in whatever residue of the fight with Namayan still hangs visible in the air, something even a trained hunter's eyes can apparently read. I followed the noise, he says, slow, working something out in real time. That wasn't a fight between the two of you. Something else was happening here. You should finish what you came for, I manage, too exhausted to make it sound like much of a threat. I'm not in any shape to stop you. He doesn't move toward me. Instead, his gaze goes to the old plaque on the wall, the same faded lettering Alina read earlier, and something shifts across his face. Recognition, maybe, or a memory surfacing from some corner of his own training. The Sundering, he says, quiet. I know this story too. Every guild hunter does, in the version they teach recruits, a warning about what happens when awakened stop answering to anyone but their own god's will. He looks back at me, and whatever conclusion he's reaching, it isn't the one I expected. Tell me what's actually happening here. All of it. I've hunted you for months on the assumption you were the threat. I'd like to know if I've been wrong before I decide what to do next. I tell him. Alina fills in the parts I'm too tired to manage, steady even now, even drained. Irvin listens the way he fights, patient, methodical, weighing each piece before moving to the next. And when we finally finish, he's quiet for longer than either of us expects. I've spent 3 years hunting Awakened who abuse the power their gods gave them, he says finally. Corvin. Vale. Half the names on your list, if I'm honest. I'd flagged most of them myself through proper channels and watched the guild do nothing because they paid their dues on time. I didn't become a hunter to protect men like that. I became one because I believed the guild was supposed to stop them. He sheathes his sword, slow, deliberate. A god trying to break his own seal by using a grieving boy as a weapon is a considerably larger problem than one fugitive with a body count. I find my priorities have shifted rather suddenly. You're not going to bring me in. No, a ghost of something almost like dry humor crosses his face. I find I'd rather bring in the actual threat. Turns out that isn't you. Nemeon says nothing through any of this. I can still feel him distant and diminished, a presence pushed back but not gone entirely. Weakened, maybe, by whatever Alina's counterweight cost him, but far from finished. We have him on the back foot for the first time since the bottom of that drowning pool. None of us mistake that for the fight being over. Nemayan doesn't stay quiet for long. 3 days after the chapel, while we're holed up in a hunting lodge, Irvin knows off the official maps, the pressure returns. Smaller this time, testing rather than forcing. Like a hand checking a locked door instead of trying to break it down. I feel him prodding at the edges of the counterweight Alina built, patient in a way that tells me he hasn't given up on the plan. He's just recalculating. He's not going to stop, Irvin says, once I've described what I felt. He spent the last 3 days studying, of all things, the same chapel plaque Alina translated. Along with 2 other fragments of the sundering, he's managed to track down through guild contacts he trusts enough to ask quiet questions. A weakened seal is still a seal, but it's a seal under strain. If he keeps testing it the way you're describing, eventually he finds the give in it. We're not looking at a standoff, we're looking at a countdown, so what do? We finish what almost worked in that chapel, Alina says. Properly this time. Not a desperate counterweight thrown together in the middle of a crisis, something deliberate. What they design over the next 2 days isn't a plan built around strength. It's built around exactly what Nemeon's own bargain runs on: threads, connection, the difference between power taken and power freely given. Alina's offering weakened him briefly, because it introduced something into the bond he couldn't simply overpower, devotion that didn't answer to fear. Irvin adds a piece neither of us expected, his own oath as a guild hunter, sworn originally to protect people from exactly the kind of abuse of power Nemayan represents, redirected now, deliberately, towards severing rather than binding, not power in the way Nemayan understands power. Intention, given consciously, aimed at the specific weakness his own philosophy created, a god who only understands threads as leash and never as choice, arriving now at 3 people whose threads to each other were never built on either. It might not be enough, Alina admits the night before. We're improvising against something 1,000 years old. It doesn't need to be enough on its own, I say. It needs to be enough alongside everything else I've already taken from him. Every anchor already cut weakened the seal. This doesn't have to finish it alone. It just has to be the piece that tips it the rest of the way. Nobody argues with that math. It's the only kind of math any of us have left to work with. There's a cost to accepting a plan built on hope instead of certainty, and none of us pretend otherwise the night before. Alina spends most of it in quiet prayer, not the desperate kind, something steadier, preparing herself, I think, for whatever giving this much of her connection to Vera might eventually cost her, later in ways none of us can predict yet. Irvin cleans his sword with the same methodical patience he's brought to everything since the chapel, though I notice his hands pause more than once, some private reckoning happening behind his eyes that he doesn't share out loud. I don't sleep at all. I sit by the lodge's small fire and think about Tem, about Black Drop, about how strange it is that the ending of all this was never going to look anything like what I imagined at the bottom of that drowning pool. We find him, or rather he finds us, back at the mouth of the same cave system where this all began, drawn there by something neither Nemayan nor any of us can fully explain except to guess that the seal's oldest anchor point still pulls at whatever's left of him, even weakened, even furious. The confrontation isn't a battle in any way the stories would recognize. There's no monster made visible, no clash of blades against something with teeth. It's quieter than that, and somehow worse. The ground itself seeming to strain under a weight none of us can see. Old stone groaning in protest. The cave's ancient dark thickening around us like something holding its breath. You could have had everything, Nemayan's voice says, from everywhere and nowhere at once, no longer patient, no longer careful. I offered you power beyond anything a miner's son should ever have touched, and you're going to throw it away for people you've known a matter of months. You offered me a lie, I say. Power was just the wrapping it came in. Does the wrapping matter in the end? You have the power regardless. Everything I gave you is still yours to keep, whatever you decide about me. Then let's find out what it's actually worth, I say, when it isn't yours to command anymore. I don't fight him with strength. There's nothing to swing a blade at, no body to strike. What I do instead is exactly what we planned in that hunting lodge. I stop resisting the pull he's exerting and instead follow it inward toward the source. The way you'd trace a rope back to whatever it's tied to instead of straining uselessly against the far end of it. Alina's beside me, her hand steady on my shoulder, offering the same devotion without fear she offered in the chapel, deliberate this time instead of desperate. Irvin stands at my other side, his oath redirected exactly where he intended it. A hunter's discipline turned finally toward the largest quarry he's ever faced. Nemayan fights back. Of course he does. 1,000 years of patience doesn't unmake itself quietly, and for a long, terrible stretch, it feels like the three of us are simply being ground down. Our combined effort, barely holding against something ancient enough to remember when the world had different names for everything in it. Then I remember something Nemayan himself told me, the very first night, at the bottom of a drowning pool. Every awakened is a thread, a living anchor keeping a god present in this world. He built his entire philosophy on that principle. He never once considered that the principle could be turned back on himself, that the connection he built to me, thread thin and stretched taut across months of lies, was itself an anchor. One he'd made himself, out of a boy's grief, without ever imagining the boy might one day choose to cut it deliberately, the same way he taught that boy to cut every other thread that stood in his way. You taught me how to do this, I say, and I mean it as the last thing I need to say to him. You just never expected me to use it on you. I sever it, not with a blade, with the same understanding he gave me himself, turned back against its source. Alina's devotion and Irvin's redirected oath lending weight to a cut that alone I never could have managed. The end isn't loud. That's the part that surprises me most after everything. No final speech, no last defiant roar shaking the cave apart around us. Just a long, drawn-out silence where the pressure in the air finally, completely releases, and the ancient dark of that cave system feels, for the first time since I fell into it months ago, like ordinary darkness instead of something watching. I feel something leave me. Not all of it. Nemayan was right about that much. The gifts already earned stay earned. Scars and strength both mine to keep. But the connection itself, the leash, the thing that made me his instrument, whether I understood it or not, goes quiet and then goes entirely still. I don't know, standing in that cave with Alina's hand still on my shoulder and Irvin breathing hard beside me, whether what's left of Nemayan still exists somewhere in whatever remains of that ancient seal, diminished past any ability to threaten anyone ever again, or whether the god who ruled through fear for 1,000 years has simply, finally, stopped. I don't go looking for the answer. Some doors, once closed properly, deserve to stay that way. We climb back out of that cave into daylight I haven't properly seen in what feels like a lifetime, all three of us bruised, exhausted, and, for the first time since a bell rang twice on a mine tower in a village most of the world's never heard of, free of anything pulling at us from underneath, nobody speaks for a long while. Alina sits on a flat stone near the cave mouth, letting the sun warm her properly for the first time in days, eyes closed. Some private accounting happening behind her stillness that I don't interrupt. Irvin checks his sword out of old habit, finds nothing wrong with it, sheathes it anyway, the gesture more ritual than necessity at this point. I just stand there, breathing ordinary air, feeling the absence where the pull used to be. Not empty, exactly, just quiet in a way my chest hasn't been quiet since the night I fell. What happens now? Irvin asks eventually, to nobody in particular, though I understand it's meant for me. I don't have a clean answer yet. I only know it doesn't involve threads, or bounties, or a voice in the dark telling me who to kill next. For the first time since Blackdrop, whatever comes next is actually mine to decide. The road back to Blackdrop takes 11 days, and I spend most of them not knowing what I'll say when I get there. Alina and Irvin come with me. Neither of them asks if they should. Alina says it plainly, somewhere around the 4th day, while we're sharing a fire the way we've shared a dozen since the chapel. You didn't have to do any of this alone. You don't have to walk back into it alone either. Irvin doesn't say much of anything about it, but he falls into step beside me every morning without discussion, and by now I've learned that's its own kind of answer from him. We don't talk about Nemayan much on the road. There isn't a great deal left to say. What's gone is gone. I can feel the absence of him some mornings, a quiet where a voice used to sit, and it doesn't ache the way I expected it to. It just feels like a room finally emptied of something that never should have moved in. Blackdrop hasn't changed much from a distance. Same rooftops against the same hills, same mine tower with its bell, silent now, no reason left to ring it twice. What has changed is harder to see until I'm closer. No awaken's horse tied up in the square, no cart waiting to be filled with a season's grain. A different man stands where Toran used to stand at the head of things, younger, and when I ask a woman selling bread near the gate what happened to old Toran, she tells me, without much ceremony, that he passed peacefully 2 winters back, in his own bed, which she says like it's still a small miracle worth remarking on in a place like this. I ask, carefully, about a boy named Tem. She looks at me a long moment before her face changes into something like recognition, though not the kind I'm braced for. The healer's apprentice, she says, down by the old smith's row. Good with his hands, that one, even with the arm. She says it plainly, no pity in it, just fact. And something in my chest loosens slightly at the way she says it. Not as tragedy, just as description. I find him exactly where she said, outside a small building that used to be the smith's storeroom, now converted into something closer to a proper healer's practice, more organized than anything Blackdrop had when I left. He's older, obviously, taller than I remember, the awkward angles of a boy just starting to become a man, and his left arm hangs the way it's hung since that night, scarred and clearly limited. But his right hand is steady, sorting dried herbs into small labeled pouches with a focus that tells me he's done this 1,000 times before. He doesn't recognize me right away. 3 years does that. I've changed more than he has, probably, in ways that go deeper than the scars. Tem, I say, and something in my voice must carry more than the word itself, because he goes very still. He looks up slowly, and I watch it happen on his face. The same thing that happened on the bread sellers, except deeper, longer. Disbelief giving way to something that breaks entirely open by the time he's crossed the distance between us. You're supposed to be dead, he says, into my shoulder, both arms around me despite the one that doesn't fully work anymore, holding on like he's checking I'm actually solid. Everyone said you were dead. I never believed it, but everyone said, I know, you left the fox under the door. I knew you were alive that first morning. He pulls back, looking at me properly now, taking in whatever's visibly different, the scars, the way I carry myself, all of it. Where have you been? I don't have a short answer for that. I give him the long one instead, sitting on an overturned crate outside the healer's practice, while Alina and Irvin wait a respectful distance away, and I tell him everything. Namayan, the bargain, every name on a list I never wanted to build, the cave, the ending. He listens the way Alina listened, without flinching, and when I finally run out of words, he's quiet for a long moment. You did all that, he says finally. For me, not just for you, but you were the reason I said yes that first night. I want you to know that. He looks down at his arm, the one that's been ruined since he was 11 years old, and something moves across his face that isn't quite sadness. I stopped hating him for it a while ago. Drogo, I mean. Hating him didn't fix my arm. Learning to work around it did. He looks back up at me. Did killing him fix anything for you? I think about that honestly, the way I've had 11 days on the road to already start thinking about it. It didn't fix the arm. It didn't bring anyone back, but it stopped him from doing it to someone else's brother. That's not nothing, even if it isn't everything. We stay in Blackdrop 3 days, long enough for me to properly meet the new headman, to see the healer's practice Thames built himself into, to understand that the village survived without me exactly as it would have survived with me. Poorer than it should be, harder than it should be, but standing the way it's always stood, one stubborn season at a time. Alina spends part of the second day with Issa, the old healer who first bandaged Tem's arm all those years ago, comparing notes and techniques with the kind of professional respect that has nothing to do with either of them being awakened or not. Irvin mostly keeps to himself, watching the village the way he watches everything, cataloging, careful, though I catch him once on the second evening, sitting with a group of children near the old well, letting them examine his sword with the particular patience of someone who's decided, somewhere along this road, that guarding people is a better use of his skill than hunting them. On the last night, the 3 of us sit together near the mine tower, the bell above us silent and rusting slightly at its hinges. What now? Alina asks, echoing the question Irvin asked at the cave mouth, though it feels different asked here, in the place where all of this started. I don't know yet, I say, honestly. I know it isn't more of what I've been doing. I've cut enough threads for one lifetime. There's other work, Irvin says, not hunting, not killing. Enough awakened abuse what they're given that a person with your skills, pointed the right direction, could do real good without becoming what you were afraid of becoming. He glances at Alina. Her order could use people who understand both sides of that line. Is that an offer? It's an observation, Alina says, though there's a small smile in it. The offer's yours to make of it what you want. I don't answer right away. I look instead at Thames' window, lit warm against the evening, at the shape of a village that's smaller and poorer than it should be, but is still, somehow, still standing, still itself. I think I'd like that, I say finally. Not tomorrow, but eventually. I leave the fox where it's always been. Tim kept it on a shelf in his practice, worn smooth from being picked up and turned over more times than either of us could count during the years I was gone. I don't take it with me when we leave. Some things belong exactly where they've already made a home. Black Drop doesn't need saving anymore. That was never really the last thing it needed from me. I understand now, watching it shrink behind us as the road curves toward wherever comes next. What it needed was for the fear to stop, and the fear stopped the night a tired, terrified boy raised a pickaxe over a sleeping man who never once considered that a piece of livestock might learn how to bite. I think about the puddle I used to feel like. Small, temporary, evaporating under whatever weight the world decided to put on it. I don't feel like that anymore. I think if I had to put a shape to what I've become, I'd call it something closer to what Alina called it once, without meaning to, somewhere on the road behind us. Complicated and alive and worth the trouble. That's enough of an ending. I don't need it to be anything grander than that. We walk on, the three of us, toward a road that doesn't have a bounty notice waiting at the end of it. Toward work that costs something honest instead of something stolen from a god who never deserved the years I gave him. Behind us, Black Drop keeps standing, the way it always has, the way it always will, now that the debt collected in blood has finally completely been paid in full. There's no shadow gathering on the horizon, no letter waiting from some distant shore. Just a road and daylight, and three people who fought for something and won, walking toward whatever comes next because they choose to, not because anything is chasing them there. For the first time since a bell rang twice on a mine tower, that's exactly enough.